1765, at the home of James and Mercy Otis Warren, started the idea and formation of the Sons of Liberty. This was in reaction to the Stamp Act and the other acts following, which then the women wanted to also show their patriotism and loyalty to the colonies, and the formulation of the idea of the Daughters of Liberty started thereafter. The Daughters of Liberty were in charge of promoting the idea of boycotting British, French goods, because the women were the ones that purchased most of the household goods. So this was a difficult process for the women, because it meant buying things like certain cloths, certain trimmings, certain goods had to be now done at home. This was a big sacrifice for patriotism. Now we want to go on to what we're wearing and the types of clothing we would wear and how we would make accoutrements to go with them. In showing patriotism, we didn't buy these things from England and France. They were homemade and homespun. Would you like to go over what you're wearing?
I am wearing a check silk petticoat and a jacket that is trimmed in a self-trim. This is a fabric the same as the garment that is just made into ruffles. So instead of having lace or fancy ribbons, I have just made a trim out of the same fabric that I was sewing with originally. The stomacher matches and is plain. The only lace that I have is a lace that I can remove and transfer to another garment, and it adorns the sleeve just at the bottom. There is a very simple trim at the bottom, the self fringe, instead of maybe the more elaborate trims that were just a touch earlier. Any garment from an earlier time would have been saved, but any new garment would be created in a very simple style. My apron is just a plain white silk with no embellishments, as I didn't have the means or necessarily the skill to do that kind of an embroidery. I had a different set of skills. And so now this can be discussed as a slightly more advanced trimming technique that took more of an effort.
Okay. And one thing to note about self-trim on a garment, fabric was extremely expensive, and you used every little bit of salvage. You didn't want anything to go to waste. Therefore, you would use it for self-trim. And it was a very economical way to embellish your outfit without any waste, because fabric was valuable. What I'm wearing here is basic silk petticoat, and then a silk textured jacket. I have ruching going along, and then it's decorated with knotting and fly fringe. My little silk apron is decorated with tambour embroidery. Tambour embroidery was a common colonial art form, and it was done on a stand with like a little punch embroidery hook. My mitts are linen, hand sewn, and also decorated with tambour embroidery. I have a little chatelaine on my waist, and it hooks to my petticoat. And my chatelaine will carry my watch and my keys. The most common keys a lady would carry on her waist were not the house, she didn't worry about that, but to her larder and to her spice cabinet. And then I have a little string that I can carry my reticule on with my handwork, so that I can wear that, so anywhere I would go, I would have my handwork close by. Other things that might be decorated, besides our aprons and our clothing, we have pockets. Under our garments, we'll have aprons. We of course have our shifts and our stays, and then we'll have our petticoats, and then under our petticoats, we'll all have pockets. And there are little slits in our petticoat to access our pockets. And it was very common that you would decorate your pocket. This is just hand embroidery made out of simple linen, and it was a way to show your needlework skills, as well as something to do to decorate your life. Other things we have is, this is an example of a jacket that would have been, maybe the silks would have been remade from a man's jacket. This is a simple little pattern that was found from a museum in Connecticut, and they suspect, because of the type of patterning and piecing that was done, that originally the jacket was made from a man's silk brocade, and the lady, because it was not fashionable during the time of the Sons and Daughters of Liberty and the Patriot, would not have worn such frivolity if you were a man. So the lady might have needed a new jacket. Well, you would remake your clothing. And so this little jacket has a linen lining with little silk bows, and it's made out of silk brocade, and it's short, and then it's decorated with fly fringe and knotting, and it's hooked to clothes in front. So much of the lady's clothing was remade. We have only a few extant garments because cloth was expensive, and the patriotic daughter of Liberty would remake her cloth into other things for her younger daughters, or refashion them to new styles, because it was an expensive commodity, and it was your patriotic duty to boycott the cloth from England and France. Okay, in the colonies, lace was a commodity that was absolutely valuable. People loved the lace. Women loved to decorate their clothing with this. Men loved to decorate their clothing with it. It was a valuable commodity, but it was also something that could be done. Children were taught to thread bobbins at 4, and by the time you were 8 or 9, a young lady should be able to be proficient in a simple Ipswich pattern like this. In Ipswich was Massachusetts was the place where the lace industry took hold. This is an example of a traditional Ipswich type pillow. It would have been filled with seagrass and wool. It has a cover in there where it's filled, and an outer linen cover. Your pattern is done on a parchment leather, lambskin, and then drawn on in a type of ink. These patterns would be passed down generation to generation so that you can see what you're doing. Eventually, sometimes the ink would wear off, and all would be left were dots. Pins were key to making any type of bobbin lace. The expression pin money comes from saving up for these valuable little pins. Now, the bobbins in Ipswich were usually carved from heavy reed or light wood, and the lace making industry in Ipswich started as a means of being able to take and preserve your way of life. Ipswich was a town that had a lot of seamen, and these sailors would very often, go out to sea and never come back, and the women needed a source of income that was more stable. In the town of Ipswich, in the middle 1700s, you have approximately a population of 4,200 and 400 lace makers, or 600 lace makers, were in that town, which is really phenomenal when you think about it, the population. The type of lace that Ipswich was the most known for was the black silk lace, or the fine linen trim. And this is the linen trim. Over here we have the fine black silk lace. These laces were very expensive. It would cost approximately 16 shillings for a yard of lace. To give you some sense of how much that cost, it cost 2 shillings for a bushel of corn. This could take a month. A yard of lace of this fine silk could take a month. And then you would have it in various sizes and various degrees of difficulty. George Washington was known, he's in the record books in Ipswich, of buying the fine black silk lace for Martha, which was put into a shawl. The Mount Vernon Ladies Association has a shawl in their possession that they're fixing that is made of Ipswich lace. You also had very fine examples of lace in linen that was sold. And then the lace making industry moved from Ipswich after the Stamp and the Stamp Acts and the Townshend Acts when the boycotting started, because we no longer wanted to buy imports from France and England. So instead, the lace making industry spread throughout the colonies as a patriotic duty, and it was a way for women to survive when their men went to war, because they needed ways to support the farms. This was often done in their downtime. There are many types of lace pillows. You had some fancier ones if you were lucky enough to get them from Spain or Portugal or France before the boycotts. If not, the little baskets and the pillows worked very, very well. You could bring them where you were going. You could watch your children. You could make your lace basically on any downtime that you had. And you made a lot of it because this was your bread and butter. If your man went to war and he didn't know, or you didn't know if he was going to come home or not, lace making was survival. And the Daughters of Liberty encouraged this lace making all throughout the colonies. Of black silk lace, the type that Ipswich was famous for. You have the long, simple patterns with lots of netting background, and then you have the more intricate lace for trims. These would be used on trims on shawls primarily. The smaller ones could be used on gowns. And it was black, in this particular type lace, was not a mourning lace. This was a very formal lace. Black is usually associated with mourning colors, not with the Ipswich silk. This was a sign of great luxury. It was very expensive and highly valued.